Hello and welcome for another episode of this season of Try This on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and today we're going to talk about a topic that is really important, and it's sleep. And it's the importance of sleep and why we need it, what it does for us, as well as why it's so critical, especially for people who are active or considered, athletes, why sleep is just so important. So if you aren't getting good sleep, or if you'd like to think about ways that you can improve your sleep, if you're not sure if you're really getting good quality sleep or not, we're going to talk about all of that today. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually track your sleep. One is you can use the Oura ring, which is a tracking. It's a ring that you wear that gives you a bunch of data as far as like your sleep, your heart rate variability, your resting heart rate. Are you, it's tracking your nervous system to see if you are recovered well. And there's a lot of data that you can grab from that. There's also the Whoop, and there's other smartwatches that you probably wear to like track all of your, training and stuff. And those all sometimes can give you data on how you're sleeping. Now, whether they're super accurate or not depends on the device. And it, is worth, one of the things that actually is really helpful is if even if you aren't necessarily noticing any improvements on like what the data is telling you, if you track your sleep by like how you're waking up and feeling in the morning, and if you feel like you feel better after trying some of like the things that we're going to talk about in a little bit, then, it might just be that you don't have to rely entirely on the app, right? Data only goes so far. If you wake up feeling with more quality sleep and like you feel like you're rested, that's a good place to be. So let's chat about like if you do actually have that data, like light sleep, REM sleep, slow wave sleep, longer REM sleep. If you have that data that shows you those ups and downs and where you are in your sleep cycle, then we'll talk about what all of that means. So REM sleep is basically when you dream. It's for memory consolidation. It's this REM sleep should be getting longer and longer throughout the night. So like what you might see at the beginning is that you'll start out with very short REM sleep, and then that may get you. And then as you go throughout the night, it gets longer and longer, and you'll see just these longer REM sleep. So like, for example, if you are like looking at your app, if you pulled that up right now, the first REM sleep might be around 10 minutes or so. So it's super short. But then as you get into the night, it should be getting into like 90-minute chunks of time that you're spending in REM sleep. And for athletes, it's pretty normal to see the sleep go for about 60 to 100 minutes. And overall, if you were to look at all of that REM sleep should take up about 20% of your overall sleep for the night. And that's a really healthy sleep cycle, is spending about 20% of time in that REM sleep. So then you also have something called slow wave sleep. And this is really important because it's in slow wave sleep that you get tissue regeneration. So this is all that recovery stuff. This is when you build and repair bone. This is when you build muscles. And also here, your immune system will get a boost as well. It's just full repair mode. Like that's what slow wave sleep is about. 25 to 30% of your total night sleep should be in slow wave sleep. So you can go and you can kind of look and see what your app is telling you and how long you're spending in REM sleep and how long you're spending in slow wave sleep. But those are the two big factors that you want to keep in mind. And then on top of that, we have, some light sleep and stuff that you may have some disturbances where you come up and you wake up and then go back to bed. But just generally speaking, if you can have enough of that REM sleep and that slow wave sleep, you're going to be considered sleeping well. We'll call it that. But let's say maybe you have difficulties falling asleep or you have difficulty staying asleep. One mistake that people will make is that they take melatonin for sleep. And I know I'm about to get people go, huh? Because I know a lot of people take melatonin to help them sleep. So one of the things that I talk about, in some of my other platforms is that hormones affect our sleep, because your sleep can get worse during certain phases of the menstrual cycle. And for, our peri and postmenopausal women out there, it's because most of this is because estrogen flatlines, and that affects your ability to create serotonin. And then that can lead to ultimately a lower production in melatonin. So it's really common, especially for our women out there and our female athletes, to experience issues with their sleep, partially because of how your hormones are going in and changing throughout the month, but then also changing throughout your life. And serotonin is one of the pieces that drives that melatonin production. So, but here's where people make a mistake, is that they take melatonin because just about everyone, like, right, you hear, oh, you don't sleep well, have you tried melatonin? And it's it's highly recommended. But what people don't know is that taking melatonin in tablet form, it just doesn't work the same as when your body produces it naturally. And the thing about this is, you might hear this as well. Like, some people will take melatonin and they'll feel like it helps and they really like it and it's a good fit for them, which, remember, as a theme of this entire podcast as a whole, it's all about what works well for you specifically. So if you're like, the melatonin works, don't mess with my thing, right? Keep it up. Don't worry about it. But if you have tried taking melatonin and you've noticed that it makes you feel groggy or hungover the next day, amongst many other symptoms, you've probably either continued taking it because it works for you, or you've stopped taking it because it doesn't make you feel very good. So, and part of that grogginess is because melatonin doesn't necessarily, that exogenous melatonin, so in pill form, that it's not the same as when your body actually produces it naturally for itself. So one of the things you want to think about, especially with sleep, is that if you've ever looked and just taken some time to kind of think about the way that, nature tends to run, everything is on cycles, right? Nature is on its cycle. The seasons are on their cycle. We go through each season every single year. Our time is on a cycle. And one of the things that our body does is it also is on a cycle. In the context of every single day, when you wake up in the morning, you have something called cortisol, so that your stress hormone actually goes up in order to help you be able to wake up in the morning. It's designed to do that. It's supposed to be there. This is also why sometimes when people wake up in the morning and they just feel so awful because their cortisol levels are so low, they just have a very, 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 very hard time getting out of bed. Part of that is because of how cortisol functions in the body, if you're on that spectrum of very, very, very low cortisol. But then as you get towards end, also, please keep in mind here too, when you look outside and you see the sun rise, or, as the morning starts to light up, that's all playing a role in how those hormones function, right? So then as you go throughout the day, cortisol will drop. And as cortisol drops, and especially as we get, and then you start seeing the sun start to go down, all of those play a role in then stimulating melatonin to kick in. And melatonin then, when it gets to a high enough level, is what helps you fall asleep. And so it's all on this cycle, this diurnal pattern that is how you go through the waking up and going to sleep every single night. However, it's very, very common for people to disrupt that pattern because of stress, because of other things that are going on in the body that interrupt your hormones. There's a lot of different things that can kind of get this system all off. And then, of course, too, when we're talking about sleep hygiene, you'll hear a lot of people say, well, reduce your screen time, or wear blue light blocking glasses when it gets dark out. All of those different things are suggestions that are trying to help your body be able to produce the natural hormones it's supposed to be producing. And it's all based on light. And that's that light that you experience outside. And with the daily, sunrises and sunsets. So what can you do if you want to try? I mean, there's lots of things, but just at the start here, there are a couple of things that you can do to try to boost your own levels of melatonin. So One personal favorite of mine is drinking cold tart cherry juice before bed. Tart cherry juice works with your own body's melatonin. So unlike the tablets, which the dosage can absolutely change per person, and it can maybe cause you to feel a bit groggy the next morning. The tart cherry juice helps your body with that, and it works specifically with your own system to help boost that your own body's production of melatonin, which is pretty cool. And then tart cherry juice also has some other benefits as well that can help with like recovery and strength and all of those types of things. But then the other critical piece of that is it being cold. So one of the things that happens as you get, a couple different things. So with your menstrual cycle, as you go into that high hormone phase, which is on the other side of ovulation, between ovulation and the start of the period, your core temperature raises up. And so and also you don't get as much REM sleep in that phase as well, which is why recovery drops a bit in that phase of the month as well. And what's interesting is if you can take something cold before going to bed, it can help to drop your core temperature so that you can sleep a little bit better and you get a little bit better quality sleep. The other piece of that is then as you get into perimenopause and into postmenopause, the same thing happens, right? Like a lot of women will experience hot flashes, or it's just with those change in hormones, they'll notice that their core temperature might be just a little bit higher. And so one of the things you can do with that is just try to open up the windows and make it as cold in the room as possible. The other thing you can do too is actually drink something cold before going to bed, which lowers your core temperature, which can help with getting you through the night with less hot flashes, or at least just help you to be able to get to sleep. The other thing you can try as well, and this is something that I'm going to preemptively say, don't take this unless you talk with your doctor first, just because it is something that can interact with serotonin. And if you take any sort of antidepressant, anti-anxiety med, or anything that has anything to do with your hormones or neurotransmitters in your brain, you want to talk to your doctor first about before introducing any of this. But there's a supplement called 5-HTP. And it is a precursor to serotonin. So like in your body goes through, actually, here's a good one. So tryptophan, you know how on turkey night dinners, Thanksgiving dinners, or if you eat turkey, it can be very high in tryptophan. And so a lot of people will notice that they feel a little bit like tired after, big Thanksgiving meals or, things like that, or after they eat turkey. Well, tryptophan gets turned into eventually down the line in the body. It gets eventually turned into something called 5-HTP, which then the body then turns into serotonin. And 5-HTP, because it's that precursor to serotonin, can help the conversion of serotonin into melatonin. Do you see kind of how that path works there? So there's a few different things that, if we're trying to interact with, like, does the body have enough of the things that come before the ultimate? We want melatonin, but if there's something wrong in that pathway that's not allowing for us to get that melatonin produced, then, is it possible that the body's just missing something in that line that if we just insert in, a little bit of that extra precursor, then the body can then do the conversion and it'll do it, all on its own. So those are like a couple of things just right off the bat that you can try if you're wondering if there's, maybe an issue with that. But also there's I would also recommend just talking to your doctor before at least doing the 5-HTP one. The tart cherry juice, anybody can try, and see if it helps. The other thing to do too is just to remember, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, is as you start to do these things, like put a piece of paper by your bed and just like write the date or, whatever. And just a quick jot of like, okay, I woke up. How do I feel? Do I feel refreshed? Do I feel ready to go? Do I have energy? Am I dragging? Am I, feeling like I could just go back to sleep for another, 5 hours? You can write, whatever that is next to your bedside table and just record that and see if you feel better. You don't necessarily have to have a sleep app or any of this complicated data stuff. You can just put a piece of paper by your bed and just look at that. Another thing as well that can be really helpful is some other sleep hygiene things, like being careful of not eating before bed, especially, within a couple of hours. The thing that's really interesting about that is that when you eat before bed, you are activating your digestive system. And so one of the things that can happen if you eat super late into the night, when that digestive system starts to kick in, it can interrupt and take away from your quality of sleep. The other thing as well, and so, usually you'll hear try to stop eating a couple hours before bedtime. For some athletes, though, and I will make this caveat, for some athletes, though, you're hungry, but before you even go to bed. So if that's the case, it would be better to eat a small snack, maybe do something that's high in protein so that you can try to get more protein in to help with that recovery process. And it'll also keep you a little bit more full for longer throughout the night. So that's a good option, is to just try to make choices that go towards the high protein towards the end of the evening, and not make it a huge snack, but at least you're not going to bed hungry, and you won't necessarily wake up hungry in the middle of the night as well. The other thing to do here too is just be aware of when you're taking in anything with caffeine in it, because especially after 12 o'clock in the afternoon, remember that cortisol and melatonin curve that I was talking about at the beginning. So if you drink cortisol after, 10, 11, 12 o'clock ish, depending on when you wake up and then when you go to bed. But after that middle of the day, if you are consuming coffee, maybe to give you that extra bump in the middle of the afternoon, because you're just kind of getting that drag, that fatigue that's setting in, that 12 o'clock piece with that caffeine, you're basically raising up cortisol. So I want you to consider a spike in cortisol in the middle of the afternoon. And then what is that going to do? It's going to throw off your body's natural timing as far as it goes with melatonin. So those are some things just to keep in mind, as well as drinking alcohol. Now, I know that this is also one that is a very common thing to do, but drinking alcohol activates your liver, and it can actually wake you up in the middle of the night. There's also some other things as well, and this correlates to that piece with drinking alcohol in the liver. There's some people that will wake up at the same time every night. So let's say 2 to 3 a.m. Well, what some of Chinese medicine and some Eastern medicine patterns, if you talk to some acupuncturists about this, there are different correlations of time throughout the night that go with different organ systems, which is really, really neat, because one of the things that you can do is, if you are aware that you are waking up actually wide awake, between certain times of the morning, it could be associated with your lungs. It could be associated with your liver. It could be associated with, many different systems. And sometimes just balancing out those energies through acupuncture, Chinese medicine, or some other methods can help to clear that out, support your organ system through whatever they're dealing with. And then you sleep through the night. It's really, really cool. There's a lot of different things that can really affect sleep. The other thing here too is, I know that there's a lot of athletes and a lot of people who travel for business and who travel for their sport and are often fighting something called jet lag. And it's interesting because all of the things that we just talked about, so that eating before bed, that drinking caffeine, drinking alcohol, as well as traveling for sport and fighting jet lag, they can all have a negative effect on, guess what? Slow wave sleep. What we talked about, the one that's really, really, really important for tissue repair. So all of those things don't just affect how you sleep. So you might wake up tired. You might wake up feeling like you could sleep for a few more hours. But they also actually have an effect on the quality of sleep at night as well. And that is really important, especially when one of the things that is of major importance, especially for people who are training for something, is being able to repair, recover, and repair so that you're ready to go and do your training the next day. Pretty cool, huh? So we're going to be right back after this short break, and we're going to dive into what happens with jet lag. With slow wave sleep and with that, drop in slow, so with all of the things we talked about, if you are potentially eating before bed, if you are doing any number of those things and you are feeling like that your quality of sleep and your quality of repair and recovery is low, that can lead to a couple of different things. So what can happen is, especially if we're looking at the nervous system, if you spend a lot of time in the part of your nervous system that's in what we call sympathetic mode, there's two kind of different types of this part of the nervous system, and you will hear it called sympathetic or parasympathetic mode. And the sympathetic mode is where you see a lot of that survival versus the parasympathetic mode, which is like your rest, digest, creativity piece. These two are really, really interesting. And you'll see, so like, I want you to picture a lot of people that have, stressful jobs, also have families and probably some high stress there as well. And they seem to just kind of be like running around, just kind of stressed out of their mind. I think everybody can sort of picture that. The other piece too is like, if you have something that's like on your mind and you're not, dealing with it and getting it dealt, it's just constantly there and you're not, you're just kind of avoiding it. That can also be a stressor that can kind of keep that sympathetic system, that nervous system in hyperdrive. And this really is that like fight or flight. This is that time when cortisol is high and you're trying to survive. Okay. The one and only thing that you need to figure out is how you're going to survive in that time. Versus in the parasympathetic mode, this is where we have that rest, we have digestion, we have creativity. There's a lot more opportunities for solutions. And there's a lot of things that come out of that place that are really important. And we don't spend a whole lot of time usually in that place. But this is also where if your body is in that rest and digest state before going to bed, you prioritize tissue repair. Isn't that super interesting? So, it's very common for people to say like, oh, I've heard I need to meditate. Oh, I've heard I need to, do these things. But the key here is just to remember that even if you don't necessarily feel like you get a whole lot of benefit out of meditation or deep breathing, doing that before bed can help to get your system into that place of just like, okay, I can rest, I can digest, I can be creative, I can do, all of those things. And it's also potentially going to help you with that repair and recovery for your sport and for doing all of your training the next day. The other thing that is another area where we also see really big improvements in sleep is by helping the body be able to spend more time into that, creativity, resting, digesting, and less stress and survival mode. So those are, and also too, like, let's say you do all of those things and you're like, yeah, I still don't feel like I see a whole lot of benefit. The other thing that gets you into that parasympathetic mode and also dealing with like all of those hormones and things like that is we also have to remember too, that, gut health, overall nutrition, stress management, all of those things play a role in your overall hormone balance, as well as, quality of sleep and things like that. And it's often why when I work with people that we don't even touch sleep directly, but sleep tends to improve just because we're working on some of those other pieces that can help the body be able to take some stress off and sleep better. It's another reason why, under eating and putting stress on your system that way is just another added stress or another added layer that can actually prevent you from repairing and recovering. And it's just interesting. So now when it comes to your jet lag. This is just fun to talk about. I'm including this in here. I know that there probably aren't a whole lot of people dealing with jet lag right now because we're not doing a whole lot of traveling at the time of this recording. But still, if you do ever have to travel for a sport and you are, noticing that jet lag is just one of those things that you're fighting, just remember that there's a couple of things that you can do if you're going to be traveling for, one of your triathlons or things like any sort of race or any sort of sport. There's a couple things that you can do. One really important thing, let's see. So there's traveling east and there's also traveling west. So and there's a difference. So people who say that they're traveling east often feel okay when they get there, but those that are traveling west. So like for me in the United States heading to Europe, there's a couple of things that it's harder to do that because you're almost like, usually when you're traveling, it's your nighttime. So as soon as you get there, you want to go to sleep. One of the most critical things you can do is to try to wait to go to bed until the next evening. Even if you're traveling east, it's the same thing both ways. If you can try to, I'm sorry, did I just completely mess up my directions? I think I did. Yeah, sorry. So traveling east, my apologies. My brain was like not in. I'll stick to the science, right? No, I'm just kidding. So, so from America traveling east to Europe, goodness me. So that's going to be harder. Traveling west to like Australia or heading that way, it tends to be a little bit easier. But when you're traveling east and you like going to Norway, when I was a kid, we used to travel to Norway and in the summers. And one of the things that you would have to do is wait. So you would get there and all you wanted to do was just nap because it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, by the time you reached that where we would stay. And one of the things that you just had to fight to do was just to wait to go to bed till you saw that sunset, and then you could go to bed. But it was really, really hard to do. I mean, we had to like pull games out and do everything that we possibly could to try to stay awake until that time. But it helped the most with getting over jet lag as soon as possible. So there's a little tip for you. My apologies for getting my easts and wests mixed up. But so anyway, so those are a couple things. The other thing you can do too is there's a couple things you can do to prepare, especially if you're going to be taking long flights. So start a couple days ahead of time, prioritize sleep and hydration before traveling. So part of what you want to do is stay super hydrated before getting on the flight. And if you can, try to stay as hydrated as possible during travel too, because dehydration worsens jet lag. And I know that it's really hard to stay hydrated on planes just because most of the time you don't want to have to get up to go to the bathroom. I mean, that's my reason. But if you are going to be traveling and jet lag is one of those things that you want to be really, you want to try to help yourself out with the most, staying hydrated before travel is a really key way to do that. Now, the other thing you can do too, especially when you get there to where you are staying, is remember that that light outside really helps. So if you can catch the natural light, and if you can catch light exercise, and if you can do like any sort of light exercise, like anything where you can be outside on the ground, even if you can actually have your socks and shoot, if you can be barefoot, that can sort of be like a grounding thing that can really help get your system into like that new time zone of wherever you're at. You can also, going back and tying this to the beginning, you can also take you can also drink tart cherry juice that night to be able to boost those levels of natural melatonin, to be able to help with getting you back, on track on that new time zone. So those are like there's a lot of different things in there that can be very, very helpful for trying to combat jet lag, but also a lot of different tips and things in there to help with just overall sleep and recovery and doing all of those pieces that can help to boost your quality of sleep. Now, one other question I get before we wrap up here that I commonly get is like, how many hours of sleep should I be getting? And the thing about it is that there aren't necessarily, there isn't really a number of hours per se. They're finding that every person is kind of a little bit different on that. So the best thing is to be able to just see if you're waking up well rested, see if you're getting a good quality sleep in the time that you're there. If you're waking up and you're just getting a lot of disturbances, like you're coming out of sleep, even though you may not consciously recognize that you're awake. If you have a lot of disturbances like that and you're not spending enough time in that REM sleep and in that slow wave sleep, then it doesn't necessarily matter how many hours of sleep you have per night. It's more about the quality. Okay. So you might be somebody that does really, really well with 5 to 6 hours of sleep and has a lot of energy, but you might be somebody that needs more like 8 to 9, and anywhere in there is usually fine. They do say you want to try to get somewhere between 7 to 8 hours of sleep, generally speaking, so that you actually have enough time in those different phases. But, again, there's a lot of variability there. And that's why it's just really important to be able to, if you want to try to improve your sleep, is just get something that can be reliable and can help you track your sleep for a bit. And that can be a really great way to get to just see if your sleep is where you want it to be. And then there's, also what we talked about, just protein before bed, making sure that you are, reducing your screen time or blocking blue lights and keeping your body cool. All of those are very great strategies for just trying to improve your sleep just naturally. Like, there's not a whole lot that you have to do there. That's all I have for sleep for today. So that's our episode for now. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow With Sports on all social media channels, and make sure to share this episode with anyone you think might love it. You can also follow me at Dr. Kirstin on Facebook and Instagram, and drkirstin.com. And if you'd like to reach us with any comments or questions about this episode, you can at info@wispsports.com. And you can also leave a direct message with us over on social media as well. Thank you for listening, and I will be back next week. Take care.